Hi, I'm Melissa. Welcome to the Southern Institute of Technology's education program, the Certificate in General Horticulture. Well, today's episode is all about fruit, so we've got something special for all you wine connoisseurs out there, but more about that later. Coming up, dehydrated and wrap it in plastic. It's a perfect solution to preserving your fruit. And no, that's not the Batcave, but the pride of the Gibson Valley Winery. Keep watching as I cut to the chase and learn all there is to know about pruning. Since the dawn of time, apples have been labelled the forbidden fruit. They say that one bad apple can spoil the whole barrel. But is this seedy fruit deserving of such bad press? It's crunch time as we go in search of the truth. Am I right in thinking these are Granny Smith apples?
Yes, they are. Yep.
And where are these ones grown?
We grow them here on the orchard.
Right. So they get picked off the trees and then they end up in here, is that right?
Yep, they get put in the cool store and then they come here and along the grader and up and sorted, and then we pack them for the market.
Quite a noisy contraption, isn't it?
It is.
So how far along does this go?
Goes right along to the grading belts before it's packed.
Fantastic. So if they're missed being graded the first time round, do they just sort of come back round again?
Yeah, there's a lot of people along the line, so they get checked about a dozen times before they're packed. So,
gee.
yeah.
So in your busy season, how many people would you have along the conveyor belts here?
We usually have about 30 or 40 people in the shed.
Right, that's
Between
a lot,
the packers and the graders, yeah.
Can we just follow it along a wee bit?
Yeah,
Be
sure.
interested to see how it goes. Oh, okay. So what are we looking for when we're grading apples?
We turn them right over and check for any marks like that, or this one here is too yellow. So any blemishes on the apples, we put them out. And
On the other
only
side?
the good ones here go in the crate to go to the market.
Okay. So what about if it's a blemish that size? Is that passable?
Counts.
It
No,
still
no.
counts. So any
Yep.
little one goes over there.
Because these are first grade ones. It wouldn't matter so much if they were second grade ones, but the first grade ones aren't allowed any marks at all. Even misshapen ones like this go out.
Oh, right. This one's got just a patch of yellow. Would you put that one out?
No, that's all right.
Possible?
Yeah, possible.
So how many different grades of apples are there?
We just have the tag one, the good best apples, they go to the market, and the second grade ones down the end here we'll keep for the shop, and we bag them up and sell them a bit cheaper.
Right. So where do you mean when you say to the market?
Like MG markets in Christchurch, and then they get dispatched to the supermarkets around the country. Yeah.
So do you continue to grade apples all year round?
No, usually from about March right through to for another couple of months yet, so September, end of September.
Right.
Yeah.
So how many different varieties of apples do you grow here?
There's about 12 different varieties of apples. Just depends on what the market wants, what we pack each day. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So what do you find is the most popular selling apple?
Probably the Royal Gala, which are just about finished now. So we have different kinds of apples that come on at different times. So yeah, so it's not all at once at the market, which is quite good.
So is there usually apples going all year round?
No, just from about March through to the end of October usually we still have a few apples, and that's when there's about a month's gap between then and when we start picking the summer fruit. So yeah.
So when you're really busy, how many people would you have here in the pack houses?
We'd probably have about 4 on each side of each grader, and up the other end here where the apples go over the grader itself, more people there, and at the bin tip the shed's pretty full. So,
Yeah, I bet.
pretty full on.
You have to go pretty fast, I imagine.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
that's when we're doing like the apricots, and we have a different grader for the cherries as well, so yeah.
So most of the apples we find in supermarkets all are grown locally?
Usually, yes. In the off season, you'll get ones that they've imported from usually the States, but that's good because when it's their season, it's our off season, so so it works out quite well.
That's handy, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, that's great. You learn something new every day. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Hi, I'm Greg from Dyax, and I'm here to talk to you today about growing flagellas in Southland. The main thing is to select the right variety. You don't really want to be growing a seedling variety because you'll never know if they're going to crop down here or not. There's been plenty of trials done, and these here are an early maturing one. The name of it is unique, and it's a self-fertile variety, which means you don't need to have two different varieties to cross-pollinate. Now, these are early maturing and young maturing, so they'll mature really young, just on a 2-year-old plant, as you can see with this one, and they will ripen down here in June. The next best thing to do is select a nice, sunny, north-facing position with good drainage. So once you've found that position, get a good balanced fertiliser and work it well into the soil, and remembering too that this area can't be too dry, especially when it's flowering. It'll need plenty of moisture, otherwise it tends to drop its flowers. You can also eat the petals off the flower without destroying the fruit, which is good in salads and all the rest. There's another new variety called Punamu, which is an early maturing, if you'd like to try out another variety. But you'll find for the beginner, you won't go past unique. Only growing to 2 metres makes it ideal for a small garden, and also they can be trained up as a topiary or grown in a pot. So if you get all those things right, I'm sure you'll have good luck growing flagellas here in Southland. So all the best and happy gardening.
There's nothing like chomping into a piece of fresh fruit. But fresh isn't always best. From the lunchbox to mountaintops, dried fruit is literally taking healthy eating to new heights.
Dried fruit is very popular in the off-season. It has many uses. Mainly people just buy it to eat out of the packet. So it's an out-of-season product, and there's a percentage of the crop dried each year so that there's product available in the off-season. Any fruit that we grow can be dried. The more popular varieties, of course, are apricots, nectarines, a few peaches, then of course apples and pears, and cherries. To explain to you the process of drying the fruit, what happens during our harvest season, the product, it's mainly the more mature fruit that is separated out. Now that fruit is graded into a size, it's then cut and the stone removed. The fruit is laid out on trays and it has preservative, a limited amount of preservative put to it in the form of sulphur, and it is actually dried in very large ovens. Some of the imported dried fruit is done out under the sun, but in New Zealand now it's all done hygienically in very large ovens, like the size of a room or an average sized room in a house. And the process takes about 7 to 10 days, and at that point it is stored in bulk bins, and then it's pre-packed into smaller packs as the marketplace requires.
Just a stone throw away from Queenstown and hidden among the mountains, it's the magic of the Gibbston Valley. Hi Sasha, can you tell us the background of Gibson Valley Winery?
Certainly can, Mel. The winery has been running since the 80s. It's one of the oldest wineries here in Central Otago, and we have a very well established, loyal New Zealand market that is our predominant sales. We have vineyards here in Gibson Valley. This is just a very small one at our home block, but we also source fruit from Bendigo, which is also Central Otago, and Gibson and other vineyards in Gibson Valley itself. We are predominantly Pinot Noir makers, very good Pinot Noir makers, and but we also have white varieties, Pinot Gris, Pinot Blanc, Chardonnay and Riesling.
All right. And of course we want to hear all about the process of making wine, starting right here with the vines. Can you tell us the first step of the process?
Yes, Mel. We are currently in winter, the vine is dormant, and we are actually selecting canes to lay down for next year's fruit supply, and also to make decisions on our 2009 vintage. So this is, you can see here, you can actually see what the canes that have been selected, and then they're wrapped down, which they'll become the cordons, and we select them for obviously for the strength of this cane, because it's going to have quite a load on it when the fruit starts to develop. But we also select for the buds, how many buds are on there, and also how they look, strong.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So how long have these vines been here for?
Well, in this vineyard, it's one of the oldest, so these vines range from 12 years to 20 years. These fellas, this fella here would be about 15. You can see other ones that are thicker, more sort of gnarly, and they're about 20 years.
Cool. So of course they're looking very bare at the moment. When will they have the next lot of grapes on them?
Well, this bud burst will happen in spring, around October, November, and then flowering will happen in December, and the fruit set will come on in February, is when they'll actually start to ripen, the colours will change, and hopefully harvest, as long as the weather keeps doing its good stuff, will be April.
Fantastic. And what do the wee grapes actually look like?
They're much smaller than table grapes. Pinot Noir is obviously a red grape. It obviously varies depending on the growing season, and the canopy management. So you actually want to keep your bunches small, with smaller berries, for intensity of fruit and for the quality of the wine at the end. But you can actually get a little bit of uptake of too much water if there's rain, too much irrigation, and they will swell, but not as big as table grapes, much smaller.
Oh. So how can you tell when the grapes are ready?
We tell the grapes are ready through analytical devices, and also sensory devices, so through the winemakers going out and tasting to see how mature they are, and also through the chemistry. We do a soluble solids test, a pHTA, and see how they're maturing on.
How do you do that test?
We do our bricks test, a sugar test. We actually take grapes from varying sort of places in the vineyard, and we crush them up. We get the juice and use a hydrometer or a refractometer, which refracts the light and measures how much sugars are really in the grape, and we do a pHTA, which is an acid test.
Fantastic. It must be a pretty fun job testing the grapes.
It is at the start. You quite enjoy tasting the grapes, but by the end, it's sort of lost its novelty. But we're ready for next year now.
And where do you go on to from there?
Okay, so from after we have been doing maturity sampling, we just decide on a picking date. The vineyard crew will come out and pick everything. We will receive it in the winery, and then we'll start processing from there.
But you get some fingers doing all that picking.
Well, we don't do too much of the picking. We like to help out sometimes, but we need to prepare ourselves in the winery for the grape receival.
Fantastic. Shall we go down and have a look?
I think we should.
So once you've got all the grapes right and all the levels right, what happens next?
Well, once we've decided the picking date, we organise with the crew and they pick into half-ton bins. We receive them at the winery and we'll process them based on their maturity. We'll either do whole bunch into the fermenters or we'll destem them and just have the berries into the fermenters. And these fellas is where the Pinot Noir grapes will stay for about a month.
Gee.
So we have a cold soak to begin with at about 12 to 15 degrees, and then we'll actually start the fermentation, which will run for 5, 6, 7 days, and then we'll actually have a extended maceration at the end. Pinot Noir needs a little bit of extra time to extract those colours, to make those colours stable, to get the phenolics right. So it's quite a long time for the Pinot Noir sitting around there.
It's a real art, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So when do you know when it's ready?
Well, the sugar drops and the alcohol rises to a certain point when there's nothing left. So we call it dry, like the wine is dry. And at that stage, we drain from these fermenters, and we press the skins that are left in there. So we'll dig them out, quite a laborious task, into a press, a pneumatic press, and blend the juice from the press in with the free run, and then we'll let that settle for a little bit, and then we'll actually pitch some bacteria, which is our secondary fermentation, and then they'll go off to barrel.
Wow. Can we take a look at these barrels then?
Yes, Mel, let's go.
Wow, is this a real cave?
Well, it's a man-made cave, but for all our purposes, it is a real cave.
It's very cool, isn't it?
Absolutely.
How many barrels have you got stored in here?
We've got about 400.
It's quite humid in here as well.
Yeah, this is a natural sort of effect from having a cave, and we need it for our barrels to keep them nice and moist.
So it gets plonked into the barrels, and how long does it stay down here for?
Well, it usually stays in for 9 to 12 months, it depending on what style and what actual wine it's actually going to be going into at the end. But as I said, with fermentations out there, we actually keep our vineyards separate. Well, we try and keep our vineyards separate, so it'll come into barrel in their separate lots to mature away, and then at the end, that's when we actually do a blend of those to see which one's going to be in what label.
Gee, that's really good.
Yeah.
So do you test them out of the barrel?
Well, we do regular testing throughout this maturation in the cellar here, and we'll take samples, to see how the secondary fermentation is going, and also the sulphur levels, pH, TA, just to make sure nothing, is really growing in there. Not that it is, but we just like to monitor our wine to keep it in its state.
Fantastic. So you're saying it's Pinot Noir wine just down here?
Yes.
What's it particularly well known? What sort of wine is it?
It's obviously red grape, and it's actually well known coming from France, from Burgundy, and it has really sort of grown here in Central Otago because of the extreme conditions that the vines grow under, and we can actually produce such very delicate but quite robust wines from being in the maturation in the cellar.
So does the wine actually get bottled here?
No, after we've made our blend or our blending decisions, we actually take the wine out of barrel, back into a tank, do the blending there, and it'll actually get sent away to a bottling facility.
With the wine being stored in here for so long, do you have problems with it evaporating?
Absolutely, they certainly do. As I said, with the humidity, we try and the cave keeps it at a certain level. We do have an evaporation, and it's between 1 to 5 litres over its maturation period. We will keep them topped, but it doesn't actually affect the wine in the barrel as such. It doesn't become concentrated because there's not really any sugars there. It's not noticeable, but the evaporation certainly does happen.
How much wine is stored in each barrel?
These barrels, these barriques, are 225 litres. Yeah,
It's a lot of good wine.
that's a lot of good wine. There's a lot of bottles in there.
So why is the wine stored in barrels?
Well, the barrels are not only a storage vessel as such; they're actually an ingredient that we use in our, in making the actual wine. These French, they're all French oak. We actually use it because they're quite subtle in the flavour. They're not too robust. It goes very well with the Pinot Noir flavours, which aren't, too jammy or, in your face. And so they can add certain attributes to the wine. They also help the wine develop. They actually have enable a little bit of oxygen to ingress into the wine, which actually develops the wine into a sort of a drinkable liquid at the end.
Right, hello everybody. My name is Lindsay McGarry. I'm a retired fruit grower from Central and small crops. We have had over the years 30 acres of crops, 2,500 fruit trees. We're now down to about 40 fruit trees and 3 acres of small crops. But we can still tell you how it all works. Fruit trees, the essential part of fruit trees is to feed them. We use seaweed, fish fertiliser, compost, potassium sulfate, and pH is generally all right. It is in this area. Do not put your compost very close to the stem of the tree, because otherwise you'll get bacterial and viral infections in the conducting tissue and write your tree off. A spray program for the winter, that's an integral time to get rid of most of your pests. Do not spray any chemical that the World Wildlife Fund, WWF, says is endocrine disrupting. It does a lot of damage to our wildlife, from mollusks right through to polar bears. So we use copper, limes, sulphurs, winter oil. That just about deals to most of your crops, most of your pests on your tree. And one of the beauties is, while you're doing it, you can count your crop for next season. Like there's probably a dozen cherries there. Then you can ring up and get a price and know exactly how much your crop's worth. There are a few hazards. Hail, you've got to maybe put a roof on it down here. The other problem is we use electric fence to keep the neighbours. Birds, we use a mesh to keep the birds off. And that should just about get your crop done. The nutrition applies to most fruit trees in that fashion. pH is never a real problem. Right.
Well, it's that time of year. There's not much fruit around and the trees are looking pretty bare. But here at Jackson's Orchard, there's always something that needs to be done. So we're going to go and investigate a bit of tree pruning. What sort of tree are you pruning up it?
This is the old-fashioned moorpark tree. So there's about 6 rows from here across to there, and then it changes varieties to Vulcan, and then it changes varieties to Sundrop. And then there's more apricots which go back towards the end of the property that way.
Fantastic. So they're all apricot trees?
In this section here, yes. Yeah. And then we've got peaches and nectarines and plums over that way, and plums through cherries to apples to the other edge of the orchard itself.
So, talk us through what you're doing here. You're pruning off all the extra branches.
Yeah, what we're trying to do is allow space for the fruit to grow. So each one of the buds on there, certain sizes, like those big puffy ones, they're fruit buds for next year.
Oh, right.
So there's no way that branch is going to carry all that fruit. So what will happen is eventually it'll get thinned as well later in the spring. So what you're trying to do is leave enough fruit on to carry it through the frost. So if you get frosted, you've got a good percentage that's going to last. And then you start thinning them in the spring to produce the fruit, to give them space to grow and everything else.
So how many branches are you going to take off this one?
It's hard to tell. Like something like that, you'll bring back to there. And also, you've got to try and renew the wood, because you can see a lot of that has been cleaned off because it's died. We're trying to renew as much as possible. So you've got, this is last year's growth through here, so you can halve that back, and then that'll produce fruit wood next year.
Okay.
And also new growth around where you cut the terminal buds. So there, that will hopefully sprout and push another bit of growth that way. So
Oh, very good. And what's this contraption you've got here?
this is air-assisted pruners. So what happens is we have a compressor with tanks, and that stores air pressure, and then you run the pruners off that, just to save people's hands and that.
Right. So you'll usually find those at big orchards?
A lot of them, either that or a hydraulic assisted, which is oil run equipment. It all depends on what the grower's preference is.
So what months of the year do you do pruning?
It's generally from May through to September
Through
or
September.
October, depending on how slow we're going and how good the weather is, as you can see by today. This is one of the worst days we've had.
Yeah, it's feeling pretty frosty. So in September, is that when the fruit starts coming through?
Generally, it's about August we start to get the blossom, and that's how you can tell how big a crop you're going to have. But through August through to October, you have frosts. So if you don't frost fight, you're going to lose 90 to 100% of your crop. But if you frost fight, you might be able to save 50, 60% of what's sitting on the tree.
Gee, that's a lot, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
So what can you do to prevent that?
There's not a lot you can do. You can pray to have a very mild spring and get everything to set, but then you've got a huge thinning bill. As you can see by all these little twigs on these varieties, all of them, if that fruit sets, it's going to carry a crop, and it's going to be a huge crop, and you'll get small fruit,
Right.
unless you really thin them hard.
I'd be interested to see how quickly you go about pruning this tree. I might just watch you for a minute.
Okay.
So you can get through them fairly fast.
Yeah. Well, that's the optimum, is to do it as quick as possible, so you're not tying up resources too long.
I think it's about time for me to get out of the way before I get knocked out with a flying tree branch. But thank you for explaining that to us. It was good.
That's not a problem.
We have had a ball stomping around Gibston Valley. But as they say, all good things must come to an end. But before they do, let's see what's on next week's show. Could that be the most disgusting smell known to mankind? It's Lindsay's fertiliser. And it's time to stop those pests in their tracks and bust some weeds. Thank you for joining us for the Southern Institute of Technology's education program, the Certificate in General Horticulture. If you would like more information about this interesting course, you can contact the team at SIT on 0800 Sit to Learn. And as for me, I'm going to make like a banana and split. See you next week.